be seated. When I was in junior high and high school, there was a particular movie series that came out that was super popular called The Pirates of the Caribbean. Anybody else in here familiar with that? Raise your hand. Yeah, I thought so. These movies were awesome. They had an awesome cast. In particular, the main character, Jack Sparrow, was played by Johnny Depp. Now, if you've ever seen the movie, you would think, man, this role was made for him. He was so good at it. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the movie, Jack Sparrow is a pirate captain, notably the captain of the pirate ship, the Black Pearl. Throughout the movies, there's one primary tool that we see Jack Sparrow continue to use to try to accomplish his goals and his plans, and that's his compass. Now, this compass isn't an ordinary compass. We see that Jack actually receives this compass from a voodoo priestess. Now, in fact, anytime when someone picks up the compass, it appears to be broken. It won't point north. Everyone's always confused by it. But the reason why this compass doesn't point north is due to the magic that it's enchanted with. You see, this magic makes the compass point in the direction of what is most desired by the person who is holding the compass. Now, once this fact is discovered, the compass becomes of great value. People are pursuing this compass, and it grows in its role throughout the movies. Now, obviously, magic compasses do not exist in real life, but the technology of a regular magnetic compass is actually rather spectacular when you stop and you think about it. You see, a standard magnetic compass works by using the Earth's magnetic field. A compass has a small, lightweight needle made of a magnetized steel, and this needle can spin freely on a pivot. The Earth itself at this point then acts like a giant magnet with a magnetic North Pole and a magnetic South Pole. And the compass needles align itself with the magnetic field lines. I mean, it's truly a remarkable thing. The north end of the needle always points towards the Earth's magnetic North Pole. This is what gives a fixed direction, north, so that way we can figure out what's south and east and west. While none of us have a magic compass, and maybe a few of us have a magnetic compass, we all have a compass of a different kind, a moral compass. This compass was built as part of our design by our Creator. We see in Genesis 1:26, the text says, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." You see, being made in the image of God, being created in His image and in His likeness, means that we are moral agents because God is a moral agent. God is a moral agent, so we are made in His image. As we understand that this is where our morality comes from, then we understand that our moral compass only operates correctly under the right circumstances, just very much like a regular compass. This is why the Apostle Paul says in Ephesians 5:1, "Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children." You see, the proper conditions then are set by our imitation of God. That is the proper conditions in which we see our moral compass working. As we look at our culture today, we see a lot of people doing what is perceived to be good. There's a lot of people who try to do moral actions all around us. However, it is clear that much of the good that the culture wants to accomplish is being pursued apart from God. It's not pointing to God, it's being done apart from God. And so what do we make of the good that the culture offers? Well, Hebrews 11:6 says this, "And without faith it is impossible to please Him, to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who seek Him." What we see here is that Scripture is clear, that because we are made in the image of God, we have an innate sense to love good and to hate evil. We have an innate sense to love good and to hate evil. However, we see that apart from God, Scripture is also clear that it is impossible to be an imitator of God. And so we lack the fundamental conditions for our compass to work properly. In many ways, our compass begins to act like Jack Sparrow's compass. It points us in different directions that our heart points to. Never truly points upward. It points everywhere our heart wants to point. It leads mankind to do, as the book of Judges has repeatedly said throughout, to do what is right in our own eyes. We don't concern ourselves what is good in God's eyes, but rather what's good in our own eyes. That's where morality begins when our compass is broken. We see that it becomes our broken sense of morality that dictates what is good. And as Scripture states, that type of good isn't good at all. It might have the appearance of that, but it lacks the substance. And in this context, there is a war that wages on between the perceived good of culture. Again, you see it everywhere. TikTok videos, Instagram, whatever it might be, people putting out perceived good, that we need to accommodate this and we need to do that, and this is what's good. There's this perceived good of the culture, and it's at war with the objective good found within God himself. Found within God himself. It is within this battleground that we see individuals that claim to follow Christ begin to compromise core doctrines of the Christian faith. So many have come to reject the inerrancy of Scripture, so that the Bible is just viewed as a type of self-help book, right? Have your best life now, seeking to aid you on your spiritual journey. And you know what's convenient about this is that when we empty the Scriptures of its authority and of its power, everything becomes relative at that point. Good comes up to whoever decides what is good. And so we see here that this is a step in the battle. And we would see that some say that Jesus died for everyone, so surely all people will be saved in the end. Surely everyone will be saved in the end. The idea that those who live in defiance to God's will receive justice for their actions is no longer a palatable idea. The idea of hell is being compromised consistently, even to the point of some of the most conservative and profound theologians saying that one day hell will just be absorbed and annihilated. Some people would say that the Bible's call to holiness is a call of the past, and that Jesus wants you to live your best life now, exalting the desires of your heart. To do what you deem good in your eyes is good in the culture. A call to holiness is outdated. Excuse me. It's a thing of the past. And I want to be clear. So much of this perversion that we see is done from a sense of moral superiority. Typically, these people are casting a moral stone, saying that the church is outdated, that you do this and that's of the past. And this is, if the church was truly going to be good, it would do X, Y, and Z. But all the while, it's not considering what the Lord has to say. It is truly believed by some, again, that some would call themselves, by Christians, that God must catch up if he's not going to be a moral monster. That's the reality, is that some people view God now, even as those who profess Christ, they believe God to be a moral monster. Culture perpetuates the lie our hearts can point us in the moral right direction. And so, while the pursuit of moral good is claimed, all that takes place is the damning of a generation. However, what we're going to see today is that there is good news. There is great news. There is hope to be found for the right conditions to be established in our lives. That those moral compasses that God has gifted us with and blessed us with might work in a correct way. There is hope within this revelation that our hearts can work as they were designed to. And what we'll see is that our moral compass only works properly when it points to the Lord. Our text gives us clear evidence of what happens when we set ourselves in the direction of our broken compasses. Like following a broken compass, we head in the wrong direction with full confidence, thinking we're heading in the right direction because it's the way we want to go. We cannot get good from godless. We cannot get good from godless. We will look at three truths then that need to be considered for why a godless morality will lead to broken results. And so look back with me starting in verse 1. The text says, "Now the men of Israel had sworn at Mizpah, no one of us shall give his daughter in marriage to Benjamin. And the people came to Bethel and sat there till evening before God, and they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. And they said, O Lord, the God of Israel, why has this happened in Israel, that today there should be one tribe lacking in Israel? And the next day the people rose early and built there an altar and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And the people of Israel said, "Which of all the tribes of Israel did not come in the assembly of the Lord? For they had taken a great oath concerning him who did not come up to the Lord to Mizpah, saying, He shall surely be put to death." And the people of Israel had compassion for Benjamin their brother, and said, "One tribe is cut off from Israel this day. What shall we do for wives for those who are left, since we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them any of our daughters for wives?" The first truth to consider this morning is that each of us has a moral compass. This is an objective reality. There is something innate within all of us. We can't be amoral. There is a moral leaning in each one of us. Last week we completed the story of Samson. And Samson's story was the final story of a particular judge or ruler that God raises up. So in the remaining chapters, 17 through 21, we see these other stories take place within the context of Israel. We then come to see a story that seems oddly placed. However, as the other stories revealed, this story reveals just where Israel was at in this time. The story gives details of a Levite, one who was called to the service of God, and his concubine. Now, concubine is a term for a woman who is living with a man in what appears to be a marital relationship, but she is not his wife. And so what happens in this story is that the Levite and his concubine stay as guests in the home of an Ephraimite. A certain group appears as they're staying here in this home, as they're traveling, and this group is referred to as worthless fellows. Typically in the scriptures, when you see the term worthless fellow, you can imagine probably the worst thing possible about these guys. These guys are criminals, they're thugs, they're terrible people. And what happens is they come to this home where this Levite and his concubine are staying as guests, and what happens is that these men come and they want to sexually violate this Levite. But the owner of the home tries to offer his own daughter instead, and then the Levite sends out his concubine. And so he stays hidden in the house. They say, no, that's not good enough, but eventually they relent, and they sexually violate this woman in a dramatic way, so dramatic that she dies. And then what happens next is odd, but the Levite takes the concubine, he cuts her up into 12 pieces, and he sends those pieces to the tribal leaders of Israel to show just of what tremendously bad thing that has taken place to him in the land of Israel. And the people of Israel are disgusted by these worthless men and what they have done to the concubine. And they petition Benjamin, where these worthless men are from, so where we see the tribe of Benjamin come into play, to give up these worthless men so that they might receive justice. However, the tribe of Benjamin refuses to give up these men. Instead, they raise up a force of 26,000 men to go to war against their fellow Israelites, against their brothers. Well, Israel raises up a force of 400,000 men in response to this. And they come, and after several waves, the Lord gives Benjamin into the hands of Israel, and the tribe is nearly wiped out. Nearly wiped out. We see that there's 600 men left over from that 26,000. And that brings us to our story today. The text begins with Israel in mourning over this whole ordeal. And what is interesting is that in the previous chapters, when we see these events take place, again, we do not see the people petition the Lord. The people of Israel do not come to the Lord. They don't wait on him to give direction on what to do. They simply act in accordance with their hearts. And so now they find themselves in a difficult situation. They don't want Benjamin to be wiped out. However, they have made an oath to keep Benjamin in arm's length. And this oath is that none of the women of these other tribes can be married off to Benjamin. And so without women, without the ability to reproduce, Benjamin finds itself in a bad situation. They're going to die out. And so what we see take place is the rumblings of a plan to preserve Benjamin begin to take place here in these opening verses. And there's a detail I want you to note. In verse 6, we're told that the people of Israel had compassion on Benjamin, their brother. They wanted to do good for Benjamin. There was a stirring up within Israel here again to hate evil and to do good. However, we see that it's kind of twisted, right? A broken compass. It is this detail that gives us a starting point to build from to support our main idea this morning. You see, we can only talk about a moral compass, a sense of moral direction, if there is something that is innate within us to seek it out. Right? We can only talk about a moral compass being a thing if there's something inside of us that draws us to do something moral. This is what this detail determines, that there was a unified sense of direction, of moral direction among Israel that was deemed the moral good. It was deemed the moral good. And I want to reflect here for a moment on the reality that this moral compass we have is a part of God's good design. It is part of a good design. It is something that God has intentionally put within us. When He made us in His image, when He set forth to make us in His likeness, it was intentional that we would become moral agents, unlike the rest of creation. However, the question arises, how can we know for certain that we're headed in the right direction? How can we know for certain that that instinct is leading us to do good? I would say it really starts with the question, what is the right direction? What is good? We must remember back to the beginning. God has made us in His image. He has formed us. He has designed us. We are meant for His glory. We are meant for His purposes and His plans. And so just as a magnetic compass pulls by attraction, so we must allow the drawing of God to set our compass in the right direction. We need to allow it to draw us in the right direction. We must recognize that we have been given a wonderful gift when we use it under the correct circumstances. Again, so we've been given this wonderful gift when used under the correct circumstances. Look back with me at the text starting in verse 8. It says, and they said, what one is there of the tribes of Israel that did not come up to the Lord to Mizpah? And behold, no one had come to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were mustered, behold, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent 12,000 of their bravest men there and commanded them, go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, also the women and the little ones. This is what you shall do. Every male and every woman that has lain with the male you shall devote to destruction. And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man by lying with him, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. And the whole congregation sent word to the people of Benjamin who were at the rock of Rimmon, and proclaimed peace to them. And Benjamin returned at that time, and they gave them the woman who they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead, but they were not enough for them. And the people had compassion on Benjamin, because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. And so the second truth this morning that we need to see and consider is that the misuse of our compass leads us away from what honors God. A misuse of our compass leads us from what honors God. See, the story goes on to give the details of what takes place as Israel trusts the guiding of its own heart. Again, we made it very clear. The proper conditions for the moral compass that is inside of us is within God Himself. He is the attractional force that our arrow points towards when it's working properly. So we see here, though, that they aren't petitioning God. They aren't seeking God. They don't really care about what God has to say about this. They only care about what they think is good, what they think is right. And so we see what takes place here within those conditions. We're told another oath that Israel has made. An oath was made in the previous chapter that if anyone wasn't present in the assembly at Mizpah before the Lord, that they should be put to death. And so what we see here is that Israel is starting to kind of view themselves in luck because there was a tribe that wasn't present. And so they're formulating, again, this solution. This whole situation is so messed up. Notice, like with Jephthah in our previous stories, that when Israel makes this vow, there is no detail or noting that God commends this vow. There's no detail that this vow is required. There's no detail that this vow pleases Him. Again, they make this vow before the Lord, but we don't see His affirmation upon it. They, again, do it out of their flesh, out of their compulsion, out of the leading of their own morality, their broken compasses. However, we see that unlike Jephthah and their broken sense of morality, again, this seems to work out for their purposes. You see, the plan is to send in a force that they've raised up, 12,000 brave men. 12,000 brave men to wipe out man, woman, and child. Again, I want you to think about that aspect of, again, this total wiping out of these people, to go in and bring this kind of destruction upon them. This, again, would be contrary to what God would want. However, they've made this vow before God. And making a vow before God is a holy thing. It is a significant thing. Again, this was in alignment with their corrupt vow that they made. However, they determined to save every virgin they can find so that the remaining men in Benjamin can have wives. Now, this is kind of odd. I don't know how in the world you could possibly tell that these women were virgins, but the author leaves that up to our imagination. The final detail of this section is that the people of Israel had the audacity to blame God. And we kind of see it in an accusatory tone in the opening verses. God, how could this happen? God, how does this happen in Israel? But now we see that it's the blame is on him. That there was a breach in Israel because of the Lord. So they have the audacity to blame God. And this final detail gives us a clear indication, again, of how Israel was positioned towards God. Again, when we think of, again, the right conditions for this moral compass to work right, has to be in the proximity of the one who it's attracted to. We see here by this detail that they aren't seeking him, they're blaming him. It is his fault, and they got to clean up the mess and reestablish the good within Israel. Again, so they aren't in any close proximity. They are allowing their compass to spin round and round to whatever they desire and what they think is right and good. And what's interesting here is that all the while, all this is happening, the blame is on God. Israel thinks they have to fix this mess. Israel doesn't even maintain faithfulness to the corrupt vow that they made. This just really shows how twisted things are. They make this corrupt vow and then they can't even keep the corrupt vow. And not because it's for something good, because they want to take these women and give them to another tribe that they inflicted damage upon. And so we see that when the purposes of God and God himself are resisted, then the natural posture is to do what we determine is right in our own eyes. Again, that's why that phrase is continued throughout this book. They did what was right in their own eyes. They did what was right in their own eyes. And when we don't seek the right conditions for our moral compass, we will do what is right in our own eyes. At a fundamental level, it must be understood that there is no possibility of this resulting in what is truly good. Israel determines that they're doing something morally good, but we have to see fundamentally that there is no possibility that this can be a good thing. Because when we look at Colossians 1, 16 through 17, we see the Apostle Paul say this, "For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." We see that things start with Christ. They come through Christ. They hold together because of Christ. And so the only proper trajectory of actions is to the glory of God, is to the glory of Christ. Because all things are through him. All things are for him. And so when our compass is directing us elsewhere, we can be sure and know that it can't be trusted, that it's broken. If it is not pointing to his glory, to his excellency, to his purposes, his plans, we know it cannot be trusted. And so use this as a lens in which you perceive the cultural good. Again, there are a lot of things trying to draw and attract your compass and try to lead you in a certain direction. But don't just follow blindly. Test those things through this lens. Ask the question, which way is this pointing me towards? This cause, this position, what or whom is it glorifying? Does it even have the capacity to honor God? Does it even have the capacity to honor Christ if I do this thing? If I follow this cultural good? Again, allow God to draw the needle of your heart in the right direction, because when it's misused, our compass actually leads us from him. It leads us away from him. Look back with me at our text starting in verse 16. Then the elders of the congregation said, "What shall we do for wives for those who are left, since the women are destroyed out of Benjamin?" And they said, "There must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe not be blotted out from Israel. Yet we cannot give them wives from our daughters." For the people of Israel had sworn, "Cursed be he who gives a wife to Benjamin." So they said, "Behold, there is the yearly feast of the Lord at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Libanoah." And they commanded the people of Benjamin, saying, "Go and lie in ambush in the vineyards and watch. If the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards and snatch each man his wife from the daughters of Shiloh, and then go into the land of Benjamin. And when their fathers or their brothers come to complain to us, we will say to them, grant them graciously to us, because they did not take for each man of them his wife in battle. Neither did you give them to them, else you would now be guilty." And the people of Benjamin did so, and they took their wives, according to their number, from the dancers whom they carried off. And they went and returned to their inheritance, and rebuilt the towns and lived in them. And the people of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family, and they went out from there every man to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And so the third truth to consider this morning is that the misuse of our compass leads us from what honors each other. So it leads us from what honors God, and it leads us from what honors each other. You see, Israel continues to go in the direction that best suits their moral compass. The elders of Israel instruct the Benjamite men to set up an ambush. They are to lurk outside this festival that is taking place in Shiloh and abduct women. And abduct them. What we see here is that this Hebrew term that's used for ambush actually also is used quite literally as abduct. They're being told to go wait in this vineyard and abduct women. At this point, why can't they just justify going in and just fighting these men? Clearly, they have no problem sending in armed forces to destroy everybody and take wives. Why can't they do that? Why do they have to abduct them? Well, the text tells us that the festival was in Shiloh. And that's important for us because it was a festival to honor Yahweh, God. This means that the women are Israelites, that they are women of Israel. Well, we see here they don't want to kill more Israelites, but remember, all of these Israelites had made a vow before the Lord that they wouldn't give their daughters. So this wild plan begins to hatch and come together. And the elders of Israel recognize that this is a wild plan. They recognize that the fathers and the brothers of these women aren't going to be too happy with this plan. They're going to come to them and bring complaint. And so what the elders of Israel tell Benjamin, these men of Benjamin, don't worry, we will deal with the complainers. When they come and complain, we're going to tell them what has happened. So this is what their logic is for why this is an okay thing to do. Is that they all fell short in helping Benjamin. Remember, they found 400 virgins from Jabesh Gilead and gave them to 600 men within Benjamin. So they're making the argument, oh, well, we have failed to help Benjamin, so you have failed to help Benjamin, fathers and brothers. And also, you can have a clean conscience because they were taken from you. You didn't give them. So be okay with it because, well, you failed on this one hand. And don't feel guilty because you didn't give them, you didn't break your vow. They were taken. And so the plan moves forward. And Benjamin gets all the wives they need, and we're told that everyone goes back to their lands. We're not even told about the complainers. We're not even told about what happens. Everyone goes back to their land. And while this appears to be the end of the book of Judges, this is the last chapter, the final verses of our journey here, the author gives one last statement. He says, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. What a fitting statement to end this narrative. And really the whole book of Judges for that matter. All of these actions are done under the guise of a moral good. Again, they are doing what is right in their own eyes. Kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that when we see people doing things that are good apart from God, they truly believe that it is right in their own eyes. They believe that it is good. It comes from a sense of moral superiority. In fact, oftentimes they judge how the church does what is good as not actually being good. We see that throughout all of culture. Again, we are viewed as moral monsters, morally apathetic. And so we see here that this really emphasizes what is happening not just in Israel, but even in our own culture. All these actions, again, are done under this guise. We must do this, again, because God didn't come through. We must do this because we didn't come through for Benjamin. We need to do what is good. All the while, what does the text say? That they were, again, doing what was right in their own eyes. They continued to resist any dependence on God's direction. They didn't seek Him. They weren't attracted to Him. That's the reality. There's a big problem, is that that needle never is attracted to Yahweh. So on the outward, they have the appearance of godly, the appearance of being His children, but they aren't. And what a wake-up call that can be for the church today. What a wake-up call that can be, that we can have the outward appearance of holiness, but be inwardly corrupt. We can determine that we are seeking to do what is good, but doing what is good in our own eyes, and not concerned with what He determines to be good. And so this leads here with Israel to the manipulation of their people. Again, daughters are given away that shouldn't have been given away because they are taken away. They're not truly given. They're being taken from them. So while the claim was made that the decisions were made for the good of Israel, good was resisted at every point. And only harm takes place. People die. Children die. All these things happen. And they believe they are doing what is right and good. And this is very similar to our culture. Romans 1:28 says, "And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done." In our flesh, we only seek to honor our flesh. In our flesh, we have a debased mind. We have a hostile mind towards God. There's no natural instinct or attraction to the good of God. There's only resistance. And we see that taking place here. Even when we seek to do something that appears to be morally good, something selfless for another, if it is done apart from God, it's being done unto ourselves. That's the reality, is that at the end of the day, any moral good that is done apart from God can't be done to the honor of anyone else but themselves. It makes me feel good. Makes me feel superior. Makes me the primary focus of the action in the end. The reality is that honoring each other is birthed from honoring God. The reality is that honoring each other is birthed from honoring God. Matthew 22:37-39 says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all of your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." The love of God informs the love of man. If we don't love God, if we don't seek God, if we don't pursue God, we can't love each other. We can't love our neighbor. That's what Scripture is telling us. And so if our compass isn't pointing us towards God, then we cannot believe that the direction of our compass is directing us to true love. If we are to honor God and honor neighbor, our compass needs to be cared for. It needs to be cared for. The theologian Rosaria Butterfield once said, "You can love someone without giving a false blessing." You see, when we truly love our neighbor and we seek to align with God, church, we see that ultimately there are going to be times where the culture is at odds with us. We don't have to, again, to love people, we don't have to give a false blessing. We don't have to compromise what God has said in His Word, what God has called us to love someone. In fact, when that compromising takes place, when that false blessing takes place, then we aren't truly honoring our neighbor because we aren't honoring God. But church, the good news this morning, the hope this morning is that our compass doesn't need to remain in these broken environments, in these poor conditions. You see, Christ was broken so that we can be made whole. Christ went to the cross that we might be redeemed. Christ overcame death in the grave so that our compass would no longer lead us there. You see, because that's truly what is happening. Despite all the perceived moral good that we do apart from God, truly what is happening is that our moral compass is leading us to sin and to death. But Christ overcame so that we no longer are headed there. The good news is that we have been given a renewed capacity to love God and to love neighbor. So church, let us be that our burden today, to love God and love neighbor, and follow the compass that is pointed to Christ.